We will now move on to the next item of business, and the next item of business is portfolio questions. And the first portfolio this afternoon is Constitution, External Affairs and Culture and Parliamentary Business. And at question number 1, I call Ash Regan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government, as part of its work to further the case for Scottish independence, what specific actions it is taking to strengthen Scotland's democratic infrastructure, authority and state-building preparations to ensure that the Scottish Parliament could become the legislature of an independent Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
Well, I thank the member for her question. Scotland already has much of the infrastructure and institutions that make it well placed to become an independent state. The Scottish Parliament is a vibrant, dynamic and evolving democratic institution representing the people of Scotland. We also have recent experience of developing new bodies to serve the people of Scotland, including Social Security Scotland, the Scottish National Investment Bank and Revenue Scotland, amongst others. And we set out the preparatory steps we'll be taking through the Building a New Scotland series. More details on our vision for an independent Scotland is also set out in the series.
Ash Regan.
So we've had years of rhetoric, but little readiness, and a constitutional convention was promised in the 2021 SNP manifesto. Civil service preparation and Holyrood Authority were set out in Scotland's Right to Choose in 2019, and the Building a New Scotland series began in 2022. 14 papers were pledged, and I believe I have set out to the Chamber what I thought of them, but the final one still hasn't appeared. Promises aren't preparations, and paper isn't progress. If this Parliament is to be the foundation of an independent state, not just a slogan factory, will the Government now set out how they are going to run a convention, as promised this summer, and publish a serious, credible roadmap to independence?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm sure, Presiding Officer, you would wish me to answer the question that's been put in relation to democratic infrastructure. And Scotland has a long history of looking beyond its borders to trade, to cooperate, to learn, innovate and inspire, and our international engagement provides tangible benefits to our people, to businesses and institutions. It also forms a key part of our commitment to be a good global citizen by making a positive contribution to addressing global challenges. And our people, businesses, universities and cultural organisations have long benefited from this collaboration and have made significant contributions globally. Much of this is captured in the Building a New Scotland series. The last of those is still to come, and I would commend that to the member for Edinburgh Eastern.
Supplementary, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Aside from the fact that the people of the United Kingdom voted overwhelmingly for the Union in 2014, does the Cabinet Secretary accept that the current democratic infrastructures within the Scottish Parliament, with timed speeches, prescript answers, debates which we have little or no responsibility over, is stifling public confidence in democracy? So how will this be addressed in the next session of Parliament, Cabinet Secretary?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I listened very closely to Mr Stewart's pre-scripted question, and I hope he is re-elected to the next Parliament. So if in that, and I am happy enough to be re-elected, I look forward to listening to his questions which are not pre-scripted. Look, there are different customs and practices in different parliaments. And I am not reading an answer that has been prepared for me, as everybody can see. And I am a strong believer that parliamentarians, whether in government or in opposition, should have the strength of their convictions to be able to make their case without necessarily reading them out at great length. And if that is something that other members, including Mr Stewart, would like to start doing, I would look forward to that too.
Question number 2, Elena Whittam.
Ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the latest births and deaths figures published by National Records for Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
Scotland's changing demographic composition, in part driven by deaths continuing to outweigh births, as shown within NRS statistics, has significant implications for our future economy, communities and public services. And this Government remains committed to responding to this challenge through delivering our population strategy overseen by the Ministerial Population Task Force. With inward migration as the primary driver of our population growth, we continue to make a strong case to the UK Government for tailored migration solutions such as our rural visa pilot and the Scottish graduate visa to address Scotland's distinct needs and ensure that we maintain and grow our working age population.
Elena Whittam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. With birth rates in Scotland being a reported 3.9% lower than average in the first 3 months of this year, does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that Scotland continues to grapple with the challenges of a declining birth rate and an ageing population, giving rise to significant workforce travels and pressures on public services, specifically increasing demand for health and social care services? And does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that UK immigration policies do not take into account Scotland's unique circumstances, and it is imperative that we have the powers to introduce a Scottish visa system akin to the systems that work in Canada, which would help Scotland grow its population?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I agree with Elena Whittam, and her experience from the Canadian experience is instructive. Incidentally, there are also similar provisions in Australia. I absolutely agree that we need immigration measures tailored to Scotland's distinct needs. If it's possible in those countries, I don't see why it's not possible here. And as a member of as a previous chair of the Ministerial Population Task Force, I'm very well aware of Scotland's demographic challenges and their potential impacts on our economy, our communities and our public services. All of our current population growth comes from inward migration, and as a result, we've long made the case that Scotland needs bespoke migration solutions tailored to our distinct needs to enable us to adequately address these challenges.
Question number 3, Stephen Kerr.
To ask the Scottish Government for what reason medical supplies were sent to Ukraine with a condition that they be used for civilian purposes only.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Ukrainian government specifically requested humanitarian assistance for the health care of their citizens and provided a list of requirements which Scottish Government looked at to source via the National Health Service. The medical equipment was transported by established humanitarian aid partner, the International Committee for the Red Cross, to assist hospitals throughout the war-torn country. This was provided as official development assistance which, according to the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, cannot be spent on military aid, and this is a rule that the UK as a whole, including Scotland, adheres to. The Scottish Government fully supports Ukraine in its defence against Russia's illegal invasion and has provided direct aid for Ukraine's defence in the past alongside the UK Government.
Stephen Kerr.
Angus Robertson is hiding behind words, as usual, because are Ukrainian soldiers injured in defence of their country not also cases of humanitarian aid? Despite the fact that our country is united in support for Ukraine, the SNP government have managed to tie up vital medical equipment in bureaucracy. So when he says he supports Ukraine, his government have imposed conditions that mean that wounded Ukrainian soldiers can't be treated with Scottish donated equipment, and that is frankly a scandal. So will the Cabinet Secretary take this opportunity to put the record straight? Will he act today to lift those restrictions on the use of that equipment and let our medical aid do what it was meant to do, simply save lives?
Cabinet Secretary.
The member will be well aware of my long-standing support for Ukraine, including military and humanitarian support, and I can give him the assurance, and he may want to reflect on this, given what he's just said, that medical supplies distributed to Ukrainian hospitals will be used to treat all patients, both civilian and military. I hope Mr Kerr understands that we responded to a request by the Ukrainian government, and we received a letter from the ambassador of Ukraine, General Valery Zaluzhny, who I'm sure Mr Kerr will know was the Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, and he said as follows: "The act of generosity and solidarity demonstrated by NHS Scotland in extending a helping hand to Ukraine in its time of need exemplifies a true spirit of humanity and compassion. The Ukrainian people are deeply grateful for the support and assistance provided by NHS Scotland, knowing that these supplies will make a difference between life and death for many."
Supplementary, Willie Rennie.
I appreciate the clarification from the Minister. In future, will he consider working with the UK Government on the transport of such medical supplies so that we can have no conditions as we are set out, that the Minister has set out in his response? Because I think it is important that we give the Ukrainian authorities as much flexibility as possible to use the medical supplies in the areas of which they need them to be.
Cabinet Secretary.
Entirely sensible contribution from Willie Rennie, and of course he'll be aware that funding to the tune of £65 million has already been provided by the Scottish Government, part of the UK's military aid for Ukraine programme, which help provide state-of-the-art equipment, including sophisticated air defence systems and thousands of pieces of vital kit for Ukrainian service personnel. So I think Willie Rennie understands the point that some others don't, which is there are different routes through which aid is provided to Ukraine. There's direct military aid, there's humanitarian aid, and there are other routes. And depending on which organisation transports it and under which spending heading, in this case overseas development aid, there are rules in place about it. I can give him the assurance, and I can give others the assurance, who want to make sure that everybody in Ukraine needs the aid that is required, whether civilian or military. These are things that we will consider very closely as a Scottish Government, because we support Ukraine in its fight against the illegal invasion by Russia.
Question number 4, Stephanie Callaghan, who's joining us remotely. Ms Callaghan.
To ask the Scottish Government regarding its provision of funding for humanitarian aid when it last engaged with the UK Government in relation to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Cabinet Secretary.
We receive regular briefings from United Nations agencies, the Disasters Emergency Committee and our Humanitarian Emergency Fund panel members. Most recently, I wrote to the UK Government this week, seeking information on UK export licences to Israel in support of our consistent calls for an end to licensed arms exports to Israel. The severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza, exacerbated by ongoing conflict and a blockade which is restricting aid to Gaza, is devastating, and the international community, including the United Kingdom, must act now. The £1.3 million in humanitarian funding for Gaza and the wider region, which the Scottish Government has contributed since the outset of the current conflict, is provided from our own budget. This is additional funding from Scotland to that which the UK Government has contributed.
Stephanie Callaghan.
UN Women's latest analysis reports that over 28,000 women and girls have been killed by Israeli forces, averaging one every hour. A UN Commission has also documented Israel's use of gender-based sexual and reproductive violence as a strategy of war, including attacks on reproductive facilities. Does the Cabinet Secretary share my concern that UK Government's continued arms export to Israel, including F-35 components, undermine efforts for a sustained humanitarian response and de-escalation? And will the Scottish Government reiterate its call for an immediate and unconditional end to these exports, which are being used to commit grave violations against women and girls and all Gaza's people?
Cabinet Secretary.
Civilians in Gaza are being bombed and left to starve by Israel on a massive scale, and the impact on women and girls is horrific, as the UN Commission's independent inquiry set out in such harrowing clarity. Women and girls in Gaza cannot, by any stretch of the imagination, be considered responsible for Hamas's atrocities on the 7th of October 2023, which also included horrific violence against women and girls, as noted by an earlier report by the Commission. Scottish ministers have consistently called on the UK Government to end all licensed arms exports to Israel, and the UK Government's decision to suspend some arms licences was welcome, but should go further. The Secretary of State for Business and Trade of the United Kingdom Government said, and I quote, "There is a clear risk that military exports to Israel, where used for military operations in Gaza, might be used in serious violations of international humanitarian law. For that reason alone, all licensed arms exports should stop."
Supplementary, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Conditions in Gaza are appalling, with 470,000 people facing catastrophic hunger, and reports of desperate Gazans being shot while trying to access life-saving aid. Has the Cabinet Secretary discussed with colleagues what further actions can be taken within devolved powers to end this suffering? Will he provide an update on revised guidance for Scottish enterprise human rights checks?
Cabinet Secretary.
That is currently in progress, and in answer to specific questions about ongoing discussions around the situation in Gaza, I can confirm to him that I'm meeting with UNRWA tomorrow, and if there are any specific asks from UNRWA about supplying aid to Gaza, that is something that we will, I'm sure members right across the House will be interested in learning about, and I'll be happy to share that with other members. In terms of the response to the situation in Gaza, he will understand that this is mostly a reserve function. I would wish that to be different. I would wish us to be able to impose an arms export ban in Scotland ourselves. We cannot. So I would urge him to use his good appointed offices to speak to his colleagues in the UK Labour Government to do the decent thing and end all arms export licences to Israel.
Question number 5, Tim Eagle.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how it supports rural museums.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government has increased funding for Museums Galleries Scotland from £2.7 million in 2024-25 to £4.27 million in 2025-26, and through this additional funding, not only has a new capital fund been created, but MGS's Small Grants Fund will also open to non-accredited museums for the first time. A brand new Museums Capacity and Support programme will also launch shortly, providing £4 million of Scottish Government funding to support museums across Scotland as they innovate and test new ways of working, which will sustain these vital organisations for years to come.
Tim Eagle.
Well, as the former MP for Murray will know, museums in rural areas like Murray are important amenities for residents, as well as bringing visitors to local communities. Now, thanks to the hard work of staff, Elgin Museum is partially reopening this summer, whilst plans to reopen the Faulkner Museum in Forres, which holds an incredible collection of works from a contemporary of Darwin, are moving forward. Like national museums, these facilities are essential to communities and schools. Will the Cabinet Secretary join me in thanking all those working to support these museums and to help protect against rising costs? What more support can the Scottish Government offer to ensure their long-term future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Tim Eagle is absolutely right. I do know both Elgin Museum and the Faulkner Museum. I know them to be excellent and would highly recommend them to anybody who's not been to visit them. Put on record my appreciation to everybody that is involved in the running of those fine institutions, and would draw their attention through Tim Eagle to the new Museums Capacity and Support programme. Funding is there. It was voted through in the budget. Tim Eagle didn't vote for that. Maybe I'll persuade him to vote for next year's budget, but I'm sure he can pass on the good news that the Scottish Government has delivered that extra aid and museums will be able to apply for it.
Supplementary, Alistair Allen.
As the Cabinet Secretary may be aware, Comunach Uís Chatua, one of the many excellent and very active historical societies across my constituency, are working to open a new heritage hub at Skulcharnish. Can the Cabinet Secretary say anything further at present about what further support will be available to community organisations, such as local museums and historical societies, particularly in Scotland's Gaelic heartlands, in light of last week's passing of the Scottish Languages Bill?
Cabinet Secretary.
While I cannot say anything further at present about specific support related to the Scottish Languages Bill, I can say in relation to Skulcharnish and to Coman Yachdrav Uisht Atua that I'm pleased that the Scottish Government's Gaelic team was able to provide important capital funding in 24-25 for renovation work in the old school, and this renovation work at Carinish is proceeding, and the Scottish Government's Gaelic team would be happy to consider a further bid in 25-26. As the member is aware, further significant Scottish Government capital support was provided for the impressive Croch Solier Centre in South Uist, and Phase 2 of the building is making good progress.
Brief supplementary, Cara Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his letter in response to my concerns about rural museums and the cost of displaying delicate articles that need environmental protection, such as the tapestries at Dean Castle in my South Scotland region. I wondered if, in his role and with the many contacts he has within the sector, would it be possible to capture data on this specific reason for items being removed from public display?
Cabinet Secretary.
I must confess, and in the spirit of answering the question earlier to Alexander Stewart, this is an area that I'm not aware of, and I think it would be something that I would be happy to ask my officials if there is any such data, and if there is not, is it possible to compile that, and would that be commensurate with the challenge that has been identified. I'm happy to be informed about the issue because I am a strong supporter of our museum network around the country, and we want the best displays in all museums, do we not? So I will take the encouragement from the member with me, and I will reply to her in due course.
Question number 6, Jamie Halker-Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government what restrictions it places on the use of overseas aid.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government spends official development assistance in line with Organisation for Economic Development Assistance Committee guidance, as do other OECD members, including the United Kingdom. OECD specify that to be counted as overseas development assistance, such funding cannot be spent on military aid. All grants are made subject to legally binding agreements through the issuance of a model offer letter which contains conditions. Standard Scottish Government grant conditions will control a range of key issues relevant to the use of grant funding. These include the purpose for which the grant has been allocated, payment of the grant, reporting on the grant, data protection, termination, default and recovery of the grant, and issues such as safeguarding requirements.
Jamie Halker-Johnson.
As my colleague Stephen Kerr highlighted in his question, it was reported in the Times earlier this month that the Scottish Government prevented aid being sent to Ukraine from being used to treat injured Ukrainian soldiers. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm whether or not the same conditions were placed on the funding the Scottish Government provided for UNRWA for use in Gaza? And given the concerns over that organisation, concerns that led to government suspending aid to UNRWA, can he assure the Chamber that no funding from the Scottish Government was used or is being used to treat those fighting for Hamas, and will he seek assurances from the UNRWA when he meets them tomorrow on that?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, firstly, I'm sorry Mr Halker-Johnson didn't have the opportunity to update his question, given what the answer that I gave to his colleague who's sitting right next to him. I'm sure Mr Halker-Johnson will have heard me say that all humanitarian assistance provided to Ukrainian hospital facilities can be used for any patient in the hospital. So the notion that what is being talked about is the denial of support. I'm sorry, I wrote down what Mr Halker-Johnson said, Presiding Officer, not treat Ukrainian soldiers. People in receipt of medical treatment in hospitals provided with humanitarian assistance will receive it regardless of whether they are civilians or not.
Cabinet Secretary, please resume your seat.
I'm happy to.
The question has been asked. The Cabinet Secretary is addressing the question, and I don't want any sedentary contributions. Please show courtesy and respect to the member who has the floor, which is the Cabinet Secretary. Thank you.
In answer to...
I think I've made the point. We need to show courtesy and respect in terms of our standing orders to the member who has the floor, and the member who has the floor is neither of the two gentlemen who are now looking at me, but is the Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary, please resume.
I'm just about to say it's remarkable to be heckled before one even says anything from this position.
We're running short of time. Please
Indeed.
just get to
your answer. In answer to the second part of Mr Halker-Johnson's question, I'm meeting with UNRWA tomorrow, and I'll be happy to raise the issues that he raised in the second part of his question.
Question number 7, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government, as part of its work to further the case for Scottish independence, what discussions it has had with the UK Government in relation to the Prime Minister's reported comments that he does not believe that there will be another independence referendum during this administration, and that nobody is raising this with him as their first priority, in light of reports that recent polling shows support for independence at over 50%.
Cabinet Secretary.
I can confirm that Scottish Government ministers consistently engage with our ministerial counterparts in the UK Government to deliver our policy agenda, and the Scottish Government is absolutely clear that only through the full powers of an independent Scotland can we meet many of our core policy aims, delivering on the things that matter to most of the people of Scotland. And Mr McMillan is indeed right that polling over recent months has shown that a clear majority in Scotland are in favour of Scottish independence.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. And during last year's UK election, Labour promised voters change. However, since coming to power, they have adopted Tory austerity as their own policy. They have failed to scrap the two-child cap limit. They have announced plans to remove benefits from disabled people, and also have introduced a jobs tax for employers, with increase in employers' national insurance contributions. So it's no surprise that over 50% of the population want an independence referendum and support independence. So in light of the Prime Minister's reported comments, will the Cabinet Secretary support encouraging those in favour of independence to write to the Prime Minister, showing their support for independence, but also what discussions has the Scottish Government had with the UK Government with regards to setting out the process for Scotland to reclaim its independence?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think Mr McMillan is absolutely right to point out, sadly, that the UK Labour Government has been continuing with significant areas of austerity, and sadly they now plan to target the disabled, which I think everybody on the Labour benches should be deeply embarrassed about. On the question of Scotland having a democratic vote about its future, I don't think any Democrat or any parliamentarian should be poo-pooing the right of the people to make a decision about their own country's future. The majority in this Parliament were elected on a mandate that there should be a referendum, and a referendum there should be.
And supplementary, Martin Fraser.
Thank you, President Officer. On the issue of another referendum, we now know that on June the 12th, dozens of anonymous pro-independence online accounts calling for another referendum went dark after the Israeli Air Force took out Iranian cyber infrastructure. Does it not concern the Scottish Government that its central policy objective is being actively backed by the terrorist state of Iran as part of its campaign to weaken this United Kingdom?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think Mr Fraser should be very careful about seeking to smear people in this country who believe that this country should be a sovereign state. It is a position held by the majority of people elected to this Parliament, and I think it's beneath the member to seek to smear a majority in this Parliament, notwithstanding the differences that we have on this issue.
And question number 8, Hamza Youssef, who's joining us remotely. Mr Youssef.
To ask the Scottish Government to provide an update on the support it's providing for humanitarian assistance in Gaza.
Cabinet Secretary.
Since the outset of the current conflict, the Scottish Government has contributed £1.3 million in humanitarian funding for Gaza and the wider region. That's included £750,000 through the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in December 2023 and £550,000 for the Middle East through the Disasters Emergency Committee, Mercy Corps and the Scottish Catholic International Aid Fund, which includes the further £300,000 that was announced at the end of April.
Hamza Youssef.
I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Last month, the head of UN OCHA, Tom Fletcher, made an immensely powerful contribution at the UN Security Council, and he described Israel's plans for aid distribution, and I will quote, as a cynical sideshow, a deliberate distraction, a fig leaf for further violence and displacement. His colleague Jonathan Whittle just this week described the situation, and again, I will quote, what we're seeing is carnage. It's weaponised hunger. It is forced displacement. It is a death sentence for people just trying to survive. It appears to be the erasure of Palestinian life. Will the Cabinet Secretary join me and the UN and many others in condemning Israel's deliberate starvation of the people of Gaza, the shameful killing of hundreds of Palestinians who simply are waiting for food? And does he agree with me the job of getting aid to starving people in Gaza should be done by UN agencies, should be done by trusted NGOs, not by mercenaries who are masquerading as humanitarian workers?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I agree entirely with Hamza Youssef, and I commend him for his leadership on this issue. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is frankly a travesty. Over 400 Palestinians have now lost their lives whilst desperately trying to access the tiny amounts of food that are being distributed. Israel's plan to entrust the distribution of aid in Gaza to private contractors has failed, with millions across the enclave at imminent risk of famine. This situation is entirely man-made and preventable. Huge quantities of essential humanitarian aid are sitting on the borders waiting to be delivered by established humanitarian actors with a proven track record of distributing it at scale in an effective, safe and dignified manner through over 400 distribution points across the Gaza Strip. These actors, who are best equipped to deliver life-saving aid, are being obstructed from doing their work. Without safe, coordinated access, the crisis will only worsen.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on constitutional, external affairs and culture and parliamentary business. Apologies to the one member I was not able to squeeze in the supplementary of, and will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business.
Okay, the next portfolio is Justice and Home Affairs. I'd remind members that questions 4 and 6 have been grouped. I'll take any supplementaries on those after the substantive questions have been asked and answered. I would remind members of a very busy agenda this afternoon. My ability to get in supplementaries will be wholly dependent on members being briefed with their questions and ministers briefed with their supplementaries. I call first question 1, Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide further details of any plans to introduce continuous alcohol monitoring technology for offenders across Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, we continue to develop the electronic monitoring service and are committed to expanding its use. We will continue to investigate the role that alcohol monitoring technology could play within the service. As part of this, we are considering how this type of technology might be used within our justice system and its potential benefits.
Smith.
The Cabinet Secretary will know full well that 35% of violent crimes in 23-24 were carried out under the influence of alcohol. And ministers have had, obviously, the power to roll out alcohol tags since 2019, but have so far not done so. In England and Wales, the use of alcohol tags has seen 97% of offenders stay sober and the reoffending rates cut by 33%. Moreover, we know that Police Scotland, Victim Support Scotland, Community Justice Scotland and the Government's own Electronic Monitoring Working Group have all backed the use of this technology. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, when will the Scottish Government acknowledge the conclusive evidence that this technology works and will finally roll out alcohol tags?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I do very much acknowledge the potential of alcohol monitoring tags, and in terms of the statistic that the member quoted, she's absolutely correct. However, the proportion of violent crime involving alcohol has reduced from 63% to 35%. Nonetheless, I will be proceeding with the priorities I've already laid out to Parliament, and that is in the first instance to pursue GPS functionality, because that also has benefits for managing problematic drinking because of the additional capabilities around monitoring locations, including exclusion zones. But the point that alcohol monitoring tags do have a role to play, absolutely.
Briefly, Emma Harper.
Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that home detection curfew should be used as a tool to reintegrate offenders back into their communities and to manage the release of individuals from short custodial sentences, as well as to reduce the prison population and reoffending?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, Presiding Officer, HDC provides a useful opportunity for suitable prisoners to serve the last period of their custodial sentence in the community whilst under licensed conditions and electronically monitored. Curfew is a well-established part of custodial sentences with a high level of successful completion, and it's only prisoners who pass a robust risk assessment and community assessment who can be granted.
Question to Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to tackle violence against women.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We are committed to implementing Equally Safe, Scotland's strategy for preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls. This includes work to prevent violence from occurring in the first place, to build the capacity of support services and to strengthen the justice response to victims and to perpetrators. Through our Delivering Equally Safe Fund this year, we will invest £21.6 million to support 115 projects from 107 organisations throughout every local authority in Scotland. Their activity covers a range of areas, including tackling domestic abuse, sexual abuse, honour-based violence, intimate image abuse and commercial sexual exploitation.
Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We're facing an epidemic of violence against women. Recorded crime statistics show sexual crime, rape, domestic abuse continue to increase unabated. Indeed, domestic abuse statistics are the highest ever. All the while, perpetrators of some aspects of violence against women, such as commercial sexual exploitation, face no sanction at all. Yet the Scottish Government have shelved its misogyny bill and appear to be taking no action to protect women from violence. Will they now commit to introduce a bill that protects women against misogyny and back Ash Regan's unbuyable bill in the hope of turning the tide on this abhorrent crime?
Minister.
Thank you. And just to let the member know, I did meet with Ash Regan just last week. And as I've said before, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago with the member, the Scottish Government is not opposed to the intent behind the bill. And with all members' bill, we will give it full and careful consideration and take into account the Parliament's scrutiny into it. I did meet with Ms Regan last week, and I did raise some of the concerns that the Scottish Government do currently have, but I know that my officials will be engaging with stakeholders on that bill, and I look forward to the committee's evidence session.
Very briefly, Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Ensuring that Scotland operates a trauma-informed justice system must stand as a priority to improve the experience of victims. Does the Minister agree with me that the establishing of a sexual offences court through the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Bill is crucial in reaching this objective?
Minister.
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree. I believe that without a standalone court embedding specialist approaches to the management of these cases, our efforts to embed a trauma-informed system for victims of sexual violence within the justice system would be at risk. As a member knows, the Criminal Justice Committee have heard from senior members of the Judiciary, the Lord Advocate, the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service, Rape Crisis Scotland and Victim Support Scotland, who all provided the view that the Sexual Offences Court has the potential to be transformative. And I would suggest that these expert voices are listened to.
Briefly, Pam Gosson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Violence can affect women and girls of any age. With youth violence on the rise, we see more and more examples of boys behaving violently against girls. Early this month, I attended a conference hosted by Byres Place in Edinburgh, where speakers spoke about the prevalence of cohesive control in teen relationships. However, they also stressed that the education is key in identifying disturbing behaviours in partners. Does the Minister agree that domestic abuse education should be taught in schools as standard?
Minister.
Yes, I thank the member for that, and I think this is where it's vital. The crux of the problem is, if we're going to change societal behaviour, it has to start with education.
Question 3, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with Police Scotland regarding the decision to euthanise police dog Zara in December last year and the subsequent review by the force.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as the member is aware, operational policing decisions are the responsibility of the Chief Constable under the oversight of the Scottish Police Authority. I did, however, discuss Police Scotland's approach to animal welfare with the Chief Constable at one of our regular meetings on the 27th of February. She assured me that the welfare of police animals is of absolute paramount and that decisions taken on animal well-being and welfare are informed by the advice of veterinary professionals. I understand that Police Scotland is currently undertaking a review of their processes around decisions on situations of this nature.
Douglas Ross.
The circumstances around the decision to put down police dog Zara are bad enough, but the cover-up from the very top of Police Scotland is just as bad. Originally, they defended their decision, saying the outlook for the dog was so bad she had to be put down. They refused to issue her notes, but they have been uncovered by the organisation Thin Blue Paw Foundation, which states that police dog Zara's progress was great once recovered from this. There was then an independent investigation led by the very inspector who took the decision to put the dog down. So does the Cabinet Secretary accept that is completely wrong? They have taken the wrong approach with this issue. They should release all the documents relating to this incident. They should have a truly independent investigation, and we should get a statement from the Chief Constable, Joe Farrell, who has so far been silent on this issue.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Police Scotland have reviewed the decision-making process in and around the case involving police dog Zara, and they have done that in accordance with their policies. I am told that the inspector that carried out the review was not the person who made the decision to euthanise. I, of course, appreciate the member's interest given the nature of work that police dogs do. But I don't think I can add any further light on the matter and would suggest that he pursues it with the Chief Constable.
Question 4, Claire Adamson. Point of order, Douglas Ross.
Apologise, Presiding Officer. I should have also referred to my interest that my wife is a serving police officer.
Thank you. Question 4, Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with North Lanarkshire Council in addressing antisocial behaviour involving the use of off-road vehicles in Motherwell and Wishaw.
Minister.
Scottish Government Safer Communities and transport officials haven't received any concerns from North Lanarkshire Council on that issue to date. However, I recognise that members representing North Lanarkshire have concerns on this issue. The Government remains committed to working collaboratively with all local authorities, COSLA, and we've been engaged as part of a government work on off-road vehicle misuse, and along with Police Scotland is represented on the Road Safety Framework Strategic Partnership Board. We continue to welcome input from local government in helping inform the Government's own work in this area, such as supporting a summer safety campaign.
Claire Adamson.
I thank the Minister for her answer. I have been engaging with the local police with regards to this issue, and antisocial use of off-road vehicles is a growing problem in Motherwell and Wishaw. There's particular frustration over the seizure and storage process, where vehicles are confiscated and people are able to pay a storage fee and reclaim the vehicle within a matter of days, only for it to be used for antisocial behaviour. So the police have raised this frustration. What scope is there to strengthen regulations so that, for example, a higher fee for storage might be applied that would act as a deterrent, or for the police to use seize and have further seize and destroy measures for repeat antisocial behaviour?
Minister.
Thank you. I recognise this issue and understand the concerns raised by the member and her constituents. It's something that's been raised with us in the working group as well. My officials are working closely with Police Scotland, the Association of Vehicle Recovery Operators, Transport Scotland and wider stakeholders to review statutory charges for vehicle recovery. While the levies referenced are a separate issue, I will ensure that officials take them into account as part of this work and engage with Police Scotland around how the system is currently working to ensure that our communities can be kept safe from the harm that vehicle misuse causes.
Question 6, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on whether Police Scotland and other public bodies have appropriate powers to tackle the misuse of off-road vehicles and promote community safety.
Minister.
Thank you. Police Scotland have advised the current powers under the Road Traffic Act 1988 and the Antisocial Behaviour Scotland Act 2004 are sufficient to respond to the misuse of off-road vehicles. However, the Government remains committed to doing all that we can to support enforcement and is open to further legislative action. Ministers have written to the UK Government seeking to work jointly to improve powers, including on reserved matters of vehicle registration. Work is also underway to review police vehicle seizure and disposal powers, including the retention period, and we are working closely with key stakeholders to understand the current landscape.
Bob Doris.
I thank the Minister for that answer. I think some police officers on the ground may disagree with Police Scotland whether powers are sufficient. When Police Scotland confiscate off-road vehicles for inappropriate use, the ease by which owners have them returned is deeply concerning, something what Minister will address, Claire Adamson has mentioned previously. But, Presiding Officer, on a more positive note, I thank the Minister for agreeing with me that a summer information and safety campaign aimed at promoting the responsible and legal use of off-road vehicles is required. What more details can the Minister provide of any planned initiative for this summer, and will they encourage all users of such vehicles to act in a responsible, legal and stay safe this summer?
Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the member for his question. I can confirm that there are going to be 2 national campaigns that we will launch this summer to promote responsible, safe off-road vehicle use. Fearless has rolled out its Be a Legend, Do It Right campaign as part of a broader summer safety campaign aimed at young people, and Crime Stoppers Scotland will follow with a public awareness campaign about reporting illegal off-road vehicle use. And I would encourage all members to share this material widely, and I would also like to pay tribute to Councillor Alan Gow for all his valuable work on this issue.
Question 5, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government to provide details on its engagement with stakeholders on violence prevention during the Youth Violence Summit that took place last week.
Minister.
Thank you. The cross-party meeting provided an opportunity to hear views on what could be done to address young people being affected by violence, and critically how to prevent violence from happening in the first place. We heard from those who attended that early intervention through youth work, safe spaces and whole family support are key to tackling and preventing youth violence. Building on that and what we know is working, we're considering what more we can do to strengthen support for young people and communities.
David Torrance.
The rise of social media has arguably increased accessibility and volume of violent content consumed by young people online. Does the Minister believe that projects such as Quit Fighting for Likes can have a positive impact on young people who may be drawn into violence, or indeed to film and share violence without understanding the impact of the content?
Minister.
Yes, I totally agree with the member. I have heard directly from young peoples and the families and how this has impacted them. In addition to experiencing physical assault, the filming and sharing of their attack online causes additional suffering. The Quit Fighting for Likes campaign, developed by our violence reduction partner organisations, provides practitioners with resources to have conversations with young people to think and to discuss the impact of filming and sharing these violent incidents. Their initial campaign last September attracted an average of 80,000 impressions a day through its 4-week run, and 6,000 visitors accessed further information. I would encourage everyone working with young people to engage with the Quit Fighting for Likes campaign. The more young people who get the opportunity to think and discuss this issue is important, and more the better.
Sharon Dowie.
Youth violence, crime and antisocial behaviour are all on the increase, as was confirmed by the figures released yesterday. At the summit, the First Minister said we need effective punishment for offences. I continually raise the under-25 sentencing guidelines. The unintended consequences of them is that criminal gangs are exploiting this policy by targeting young people, involving them in crime, knowing that there will be little or no consequences. Does the Minister agree that this needs to change, and will she review this form of two-tier sentencing?
Minister.
Thank you. Firstly, I have to correct Ms Dowie. There are consequences available when offences are committed by children over the age of 12 and 18. Significant action, including the potential to restrict or to deprive a child's liberty, can be taken. Action is not always visible to victims because not necessary confidentiality or data protection. But I do know that the member has attended some of the youth violence summits that was hosted by the First Minister, and we had a group of experts there with leading evidence explaining to all of us that it's more about prevention, and I would hope Ms Dowie would accept that.
Katie Clark.
As the Minister says, early intervention is key. So can the Minister outline what further work is being considered to identify potential young offenders and develop early intervention programmes? And in particular, can she respond to concerns about the funding of the No Knives Better Lives campaign, which I've written to her about, as there are concerns that there has been restrictions in fundings in recent years?
Minister.
Yes, I am aware that there are several initiatives that are currently being funded by the Scottish Government, and I will write to Katie Clark about this in detail, but I do want to highlight the Proceeds from Crime, the Cashback for Communities, which is specifically targeting youth groups across the whole of Scotland and doing great work.
Brief supplementary, Paul O'Kane.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On that point about Cashback for Communities, which is doing great work, and part of the response clearly is youth work, I've spoken to a number of youth groups in my community, including Johnstone Castle Learning Centre, who are locked out of that funding because their income is under £200,000. Now, most youth groups that we all represent in our communities will not have an income of £200,000. So what is it the Minister suggests that they should do to ensure that their life-saving work continues to go forward?
Minister.
Yeah, I am aware that applications for this just opened up last week. I wasn't aware of that criteria, but if I can write to Paul O'Kane, because I'm sure there are other funding streams supported by the Scottish Government for these groups.
Thank you. Question number 7, Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when the Scottish Prison Service will conclude any work required to ensure that it fully complies with the judgment of the UK Supreme Court handed down on 16 April 2025 in the case For Women Scotland v the Scottish Ministers.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, I meet regularly with Theresa Medhurst, the Chief Executive of the Scottish Prison Service, and I know that, like many public services, the Scottish Prison Service is currently reviewing all policies and practices to consider the impacts of the Supreme Court judgment. They are working at pace to ensure that any policies or practices that are impacted are brought into line with the outcome of the judgment and the Equality and Human Rights Commission's revised Code of Practice when it is published to ensure compliance with the law.
Annabel Ewing.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response. The judgment of the UK Supreme Court of 16 April 2025 was, of course, of immediate legal effect. Unconscionably, in my view, and notwithstanding, the Scottish Prison Service has not yet complied with the judgment. So I would ask the Cabinet Secretary, therefore, what assessment has been made as to the risk and possible costs of legal challenge. And surely the Cabinet Secretary would wish to take this opportunity today to confirm to the Chamber that the default position should be to comply now with the law as it is.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, if I can say once again to Parliament and of course to my colleague Ms Ewan that the Scottish Government has been crystal clear that we accept the Supreme Court judgment. As a public body, the Scottish Prison Service is required to comply with all relevant legislation, and that includes the Equality Act 2010, legislation relating to the management of people in custody, such as the Prisons Scotland Act 1989 and the Prison Rules, and also the Human Rights Act 1998. And of course, all legislation, policy and practice should be consistent with the European Convention on Human Rights. As I've said previously, Presiding Officer, the Scottish Prison Service is actively considering and engaged with what changes are needed following the judgment, whilst continuing to work to keep people safe and protect the rights of people living and working in custody.
Pauline McNeill.
Alexander Stewart, formerly known as Alan Baker, is serving a life sentence for stabbing a man serving their sentence in Greenock's Prison's Women's Wing. But lawyer Paul Lynch was forced to ask 4 times for the criminal record of this offender, whose offences disappeared when they changed their name due to the self-ID policy which has been in existence. Mr Lynch was told by Crown Office that Stewart had no previous convictions, and it was only after Paul Lynch sent a link to an online news story about Baker's murder conviction that the error was rectified. This policy has done deep damage. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that a full investigation should be conducted to ensure that the impact of this policy is fully rectified, to ensure that criminal records are disclosed to the courts and are accurate in the way they should have been in the first place?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, with respect, this was the subject of a topical question last week, and I am of the view that I addressed this matter in full. This was an error by Police Scotland, and they acknowledged that. Last week, they had put on record, as I did in Parliament, a course of action that would be taken to ensure that policies and procedures work as they are intended.
Question number 8, Claire Haughey.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the findings of the latest Scottish Crime and Justice Survey, which included for the first time new questions around crimes of fraud and computer misuse.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Crime Survey shows a substantial fall in violent and property crime since 2008-9, despite a 34% increase since 21-22. Levels also remain similar to the pre-pandemic position. We welcome the expansion of the survey to include people's experiences of fraud and computer misuse. First results show 1 in 10 adults were the victim of these crimes in 23-24, though most who lost money were reimbursed. Going forward, we will continue to work with partners on the Serious Organised Crime Task Force to raise awareness of the risks that exist and on how criminals try to defraud individuals and organisations.
Claire Haughey.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Fraud and computer misuse are estimated to account for over 2/5 of all the crimes in the latest year, with almost half of these crimes being bank and credit card fraud. I hear all too often from constituents about increasingly sophisticated scams, often originating on social media. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what steps are being taken by the Scottish Government to protect the public from these types of crimes?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government, Police Scotland and the National Cyber Security Centre are working together to help protect organisations from cyber criminals. And they do so by identifying fraudulent websites, preventing phishing emails, blocking phone numbers and ultimately bringing those responsible to justice. Police Scotland has also established a cyber and fraud specialist division to enhance the response in Scotland, working with UK law enforcement and partner agencies. And they will develop capability through cyber and online training, ensuring support and guidance for officers and staff. And I encourage everyone to report suspicious sites to the NCSC using the reporting tool on their website, and also encourage anyone who believes they were a victim of crime to contact Police Scotland.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In response to the 2019-20 Crime and Justice Survey, then Justice Secretary Humza Yousaf crowed, "Adults in Scotland are less likely to experience crime than those in England and Wales." But the latest survey shows that Scots are now more likely to be a victim and twice as likely to be a victim of violent crime than those in England and Wales. So after 18 years in charge, does this government accept any responsibility for these frightening figures? And when, if ever, will there be a whole system strategy to arrest these rising rates?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, both Scotland and England and Wales have seen substantial fall in victimisation rates for violent and property crime since 2008-9. Prior to 23-24, Scotland had either lower or similar violent and property crime victimisation rate than in England and Wales. And Scotland's crime victimisation rate, including fraud, was 19.9% in 23-24, above the equivalent for England and Wales at 16.1%. And findings from the next survey will be needed to understand whether the higher rate this time is a temporary fluctuation. But prior to this, we remain fully committed to tackling crime in Scotland, including through increased police funding year on year since 2016-17.